Good? Okay. So for the cranial nerves, I always remember the letters. So there are mnemonic devices out there. You can come up with your own mnemonic device to help remember the order of these letters. You would have O, 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 T, T, and by the time we get here now we're on the medulla oblongata, we would go A, F, A, G, V, A. That kind of rhymes right there, so that's how I remember it fairly easily. And then H is in the middle, okay? You can remember these using some mnemonic device, or just remember the letters and knowing once you get here, you're on the medulla oblongata. The first one up here is going to be the olfactory nerve. The olfactory nerve, if we go to our brain, we can see it's right here. This is actually the olfactory bulb. There would be little nerve projections that come off of this, and these are going to be picking up on chemical stimuli within the environment. So that could be within the air. When you walk into the lab and you smell the smell of cats, it's actually molecules that have diffused off of the cats into the air that's entering your body. Gross. But those nerves are picking up on that chemical stimuli. Okay? That's being transmitted via the olfactory tract, which then is going to the telencephalon, as we discussed before. There's a lot of other things going on in the mammalian brain. We discussed the brain for the shark is much smaller. The olfactory sac is where those olfactory nerves are, getting transmitted to olfactory bulbs, going down the olfactory tract to the telencephalon. For sharks and more ancestral-like species, these are known as smelling brains because the cerebrum is primarily all olfaction at this point. Okay? So this is going to be a sensory nerve. If we go to the next one, the next one down is going to be the optic nerve. The optic nerve is going to be, if we look at the mammal brain, coming in right here. We've talked about that already. So both optic nerves coming in. All right? If we look at the shark, here's the optic nerve down in the optic cavity. All right? If I were to take the other eye and pull it back, you can't see it back in there. But it would be what's attaching the back end of the eye to everything else in here. It's relaying the sensory information being picked up by the eye to the brain. Okay, in both the shark and in the mammal. The next one down is the ocular motor. Okay. The ocular motor is going to be this one here on the mammalian brain. It's fairly large. All right. If I go over to the shark, I can see in the back of the cavity here, I have a lot of muscles coming in. I can also see I have the optic pedestal in the back that the eye sat on. If I pick this muscle up, I see there's a nerve attached to it. Actually, it fell off. It's down here now. It's right here. It's coming through the same hole as all of those muscles. It's going to innervate most of those muscles. The nerve coming through with the muscles is innervating those same muscles. Okay? So if it's innervating muscles, it's likely going to be motor. When it sends an action potential, an electrical signal down to those muscles will contract. Okay? So it's controlling motor functions of the eye in both the shark and in the cat and the mammals. All right? There's two other muscles, or two other nerves that are going to innervate muscles of the eye. But each of those nerves only innervate one, and they do specific functions or they're associated with a particular structure. This one is named ocular motor because it's innervating a good majority of the ocular muscles. All right. The next one down is the trochlear. Okay. The trochlear, and you don't need to know this, but it might help you remember. I were to look at that optic capsule, and I have those muscles that were coming in to the eye. I have a muscle that's all the way over here. That's an oblique muscle. and I need to get a nerve all the way to that muscle. In order to do that, that nerve is coming all the way from this side, and it's going to pass through a structure called the trochlea, which it quickly swings a big angular turn through. Because this is the trochlea that it swings an angle through in order to get to the oblique, this is called the trochlear nerve. It might help you remember what the trochlear nerve is. Okay? That's a much smaller nerve. And we really can't see it too well on some of these brains, but it would be right here. Here's the trochlear nerve. Okay? Behind the trochlear nerve will be the next one, the trigeminal. The trochlear nerve is a lot smaller. If we look at the shark, here's that oblique muscle I was talking about. And the nerve that's coming off right here is the trochlear nerve. It's an easy one to see in the shark. All right? If I were to look at the other side, well, we can't see it too well on the other side because there's a lot of stuff in the way. But I can easily see it from my angle on the other side because it's only running to that one muscle. It's very, very evident. Okay? So that's going to be motor control of that one muscle. As I said, the next one is going to be trigeminal. We're going to skip that one for now. We go down to the next one, abducens, and we look at the mammalian brain. The abducens nerve is going to be coming off where this pin is here. And I'm down on the medulla oblongata now. Here's my abducens nerve. Okay? That's going to be coming off the medulla oblongata and running up to innervate one of the muscles that control the eye. We can't see it on the shark that well because it's very small. Okay? And I believe it's actually innervating that muscle before the muscle actually enters into this capsule here, or this cavity. So that is, just like the trochlea, going to be innervating one muscle of the eye. That muscle, believe it or not, when it contracts, abducts the eye. So since that muscle would be over here, if I contract it, it brings the eye outward. So I'm looking away from the body instead of towards the middle of the body. Just like with muscles, when muscles abduct, bring you away from your body, they're abductors. This is abducting, hence the name abducens. Okay? Those are all the nerves that go to the eye. Let's jump back to the trigeminal. Okay? And let's look at the shark first. On the top here, I have a very big nerve. This is the superficial ophthalmic nerve. If you think of ophthalmic, you're thinking of like an eye doctor. Okay? So this is going to be innervating muscles associated with the area of the head that's associated with the eye. Okay? If we go a little bit deeper, there's another nerve that's kind of attached to this muscle, the very bottom of the muscle. It's that string-like structure that's associated there, just below my forceps. If I take the eyeball on the other side and I extend it out, you can see the nerve that's running along the back of the eye. That's the deep ophthalmic nerve. Once again, it's associated with innervating muscles that are associated with this region of the head. Okay. If I go down to the very bottom of the cavity, here's a big nerve. See this big nerve down in here? This big nerve is the maxillary nerve. Okay? It's innervating muscles associated with the maxillary region of the head. Remember the maxillary bone we learned about. Okay? If I pull this back, there normally would be a nerve sitting right back in here, but that nerve it's really small. It's really deep down, right by my forceps there. You might just barely be able to see it. That's the mandibular nerve. The mandibular nerve is associated with innervating muscles associated with the mandible. Okay? All of these nerves are picking up on sensory information. They're not contracting those muscles. They're picking up on sensory information of those muscles. All right? I just listed 4 nerves. Why the heck is this called trigeminal and not quadgeminal? It is because if we start looking at mammals, where all of these things were named from, then you would only have 3. You'd have the ophthalmic, the maxillary, and the mandibular. With other things that aren't mammals, you have a superficial ophthalmic and a deep ophthalmic. If we started naming these things off of these animals instead of mammals, maybe the deep ophthalmic would have been called something else. Okay? But now there's 4 that the trigeminal splits in for sharks and for most other vertebrates, and only 3 if we're dealing with mammals. All right? That vagus nerve is easily pulled off of the mammal brain. It would be about right here. And it would be fairly large most of the time, but it's been pulled off. Okay? If we had a brain model, we might be able to show that to you, but we can't show it to you here. I don't think it's on the other one either.
Is it that right there?
It would be coming off this region right in here. And it would be just about as big as the area that I'm showing you with the forceps. Okay. Good. So that would be the trigeminal nerve that splits off into those respective regions. The next one we have down here, so we're back to the medulla oblongata. We had the abducens. The next one is the facial. Okay? We can't see many of these on the shark, and we can't see many of these on the mammal brain. But in your handout, you guys have a drawing, and I have each of them listed on that drawing. Make sure you can identify them based off of the drawing that I have for you there. All right. The facial, as the name implies, is going to go to the muscles of the face. But we've already gone to the muscles of the face with the trigeminal. Trigeminal did sensory. Guess what this one's doing? Motor. Okay? So this will control motor functions of the face. This is also going to be where the lateral line system of the head of the shark is feeding into. All right? The next one we have is auditory. Auditory is not really a nerve. But as I showed you in the previous video with the cochlea and the vestibule and the semicircular canals, we had the vestibular cochlear that was coming from that auditory-like structure. Okay? Within the shark, you're going to have what's called the statoacoustic nerve. Statoacoustic. That's picking up on sensory information coming from the semicircular canals and the cochlea. I said it right that time. The next one we have is the glossopharyngeal. Glossopharyngeal, we've heard these terms before. Glosso refers to tongue. Pharyngeal, pharynx. Glossopharyngeal is going to be the tongue muscles, the muscles of that area of the throat, and also it's going to be the pharynx-like structures. So in the shark, we're talking about some of those gill slits, in particular, these more anterior gill slits. Okay? This is going to be motor information, but it's also going to be sensory information as well. The next one is the vagus. The vagus, we've heard a lot about already. Okay? The vagus is going to go all the way down into the thoracic cavity. It's going to innervate a lot of the esophagus, the trachea, the lungs, the heart. It's going to go down to the abdominal cavity, and it's going to innervate almost all the viscera down in the abdominal cavity. This is both sensory and motor control. If we were looking at the shark, that's where we end. That's the last one. And in the shark, the vagus nerve is also going to innervate the rest of the gills, and it's also going to innervate the lateral line system that runs down the body, in addition to the viscera. In the mammal, we have 2 more. Mammals have what's called an accessory nerve. And if we look at I don't know what that was, but here you can see some bumps along the bottom end here. We're pushing the spinal cord now. This is not technically the spinal cord since we're still up within the brain case. We're right around the foramen magnum. But because we're still up within the brain case, these are pseudospinal nerves that are still cranial nerves because they're technically on the brain. So we think of them as accessory to the brain, hence the name accessory nerves. Okay? The accessory nerves are going to be innervating motor control of the cleidomastoid muscles, the sternomastoid muscles, and the trapezius muscles within the mammal. Okay. Then the last one we have here, H. Okay. If we go back to the brain, we went all the way around with our cranial nerves, and then we jump up right onto the middle portion of the medulla oblongata. And on some of these, we might actually still have some bumps, not really, that are sticking around. It would be in this region here. That's the hypoglossal. And just like the name suggests, this is going to be going to the tongue, glossal, and also the throat, and this is purely motor control of the tongue and the throat. The last nerve that you need to know about for the mammals is not a cranial nerve, but a spinal nerve coming off of the spinal cord, and that's the phrenic nerve, which we've already seen. The phrenic nerve is coming off of cervical 3, 4, and 5, and it's running down to the diaphragm. Okay? It's going to be what helps control contraction and relaxation of the diaphragm.